Hello, everyone, and welcome to Common Time Podcast, where we bring you world-class professional development for music educators straight to your phone. I'm David Clemmer.
And I'm John Pasquale.
And we are your hosts and fellow music educators. In each episode, we will interview a guest who is an expert in their field, here to provide us insight, strategies, and inspiration to help you elevate your ensemble. Hello, everyone. Our guest today on Common Time Podcast is Richard Saucedo from Carmel, Indiana. Welcome, Richard.
Thanks so much, David. I'm really pleased to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Absolutely. Richard is a freelance arranger and composer, having released numerous marching band arrangements, choral arrangements, concert band works, and orchestral compositions. Along with his work at Hal Leonard Publishing, he is the music ensemble coordinator for the Blue Devils Drum and Bugle Corps in Concord, California. He's also an educational consultant for Music for All and Bands of America, and a Clemmer Division of Education senior clinician and chief judge for Bands of America marching band competitions. Previously, Richard served as the Director of Bands and Performing Arts Department Chair at Carmel High School in Carmel, Indiana. During his 31-year tenure, Carmel bands received numerous state, regional, and national honors. Under his direction, the Carmel Wind Symphony performed at the Midwest Band and Orchestra Clinic just after having been crowned champion at Bands of America Grand Nationals. Mr. Saucedo has earned numerous awards and accolades, including the Indiana Bandmasters Association Bandmaster of the Year, Outstanding Music Educator by the Indiana Music Educators Association. And in 2015, he was inducted into the Music for All Hall of Fame, and in 2022, the Drum Corps International Hall of Fame. Richard is married to his wife, Sarah, who is an interior design blogger. His daughter, Carmen, teaches elementary school in Indianapolis, and his son, Ethan, is a senior percussionist at Fishers High School in Fishers, Indiana. And today, we are talking with Richard about marching band contest critique and how we implement what we learn. So again, thank you again, Richard, for joining us. John, why don't you get us started?
Indeed. Thank you, David. Richard, it's always good to see you. I've had such a respect for you and your career, so it's an honor to be talking to you. So just to kind of start things off, let's begin in the classroom. Do you have any memorable moments or funny moments that come to mind that you're able to share with our listeners?
Yeah, I have many funny moments, but I will share one quickly. When I was very young, I not that I'm smart now, but I was certainly not smart back then. And I got upset at a marching band rehearsal. We used to rehearse early in the morning. And so we were outside and I got upset, and there was this big rubber trash can that was down at the bottom of the scaffolding. And I got so mad, I got off the scaffolding, I kicked that trash can and it went flying. So that seems like, okay, well, that's just an idiot band director being stupid. But the best part of it, we go in and we have class. We always have concert band. We always had concert band all year long, which they still do at Carmel. So we started Wind Symphony 1 rehearsal, which started around 9:30 or so. And that had been about 2 hours after I had kicked that can. So I'm rehearsing, and, we're in the middle of a serious rehearsal, and in comes my athletic director. And he just kind of stands back. And then all of a sudden I see the assistant athletic director come in, and they're just kind of standing in the back. And I'm like, hey guys, great to see you. What can I do for you? And they're like, no, we're just observing. I'm like, great. Okay. If you have any questions, let me know. So I just keep going, and I'm just thinking, this is really strange. And so I just kept looking up, and this one gentleman's name was Lee Lonzo. And I just said, Mr. Alonso, is there something I can do for you? He said, no. He goes, but there is one thing I'd like to do for you. And he went over to our trash can in the band room, and he kicked it across the band room. And at that point, the kids lost their minds. I mean, it was just crazy. And of course, there was no hope of getting rehearsal back at that point. But he just, he kicked the trash can across the band room floor and then walked out. Said, have a great day. So that's just one of the silly things that's happened to me.
That's awesome. It's great to have a good relationship with the athletic department when we're over in the fine arts. That's awesome.
Yep.
Well, let's dive into the topic. We're curious, when receiving feedback from contest judges, what's the first step you take to determine which critiques we are going to absolutely prioritize for our rehearsals?
Well, I think, when we're talking about judges, I am one of the chief judges for Bands of America, so I'm out about in the judging community a lot. And I always try to tell directors, just make sure you're doing what's best for your program. Judges can definitely help, and we're fortunate at Bands of America to have some great judges. But don't run your program based on judges' comments. Run your program based on what is best for your kids. And I just think that's really important to say before we get started. But when I listen to critique, or I'll listen to a judge recording, I'll immediately gravitate to the things that are very important to us. If anyone talks about things like sound quality, blend, balance, tuning, those are the first things that I listen to, and I never want to hear those comments on the tapes.
Yeah.
But if I do, I know that I've still got some work to do in terms of making sure that when people hear the group, they're very impressed with the quality of sound and the way that we approach sound. So I do that. The visual side of things, obviously in this activity, you have to care a lot about the visual side of things. But I'll be honest and say that I'm most concerned at listening to the music critique, because that's what I want our students to get out of it. We're still a music education organization, if you're part of a high school, and we want our kids to learn musically. And I think marching band's a great opportunity for them to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Indeed. So then, Richard, going along with that, how do you balance, or how do you suggest to teachers how they balance making adjustments from the feedback that is given to them on tapes without overwhelming the students with trying to make too many changes or stuff like that? What do you think about that?
That's why I stated what I said early, because the people that are judging you may be fantastic judges, but they still don't know your program. So as you're listening to the feedback from these folks, what I always did is I listened through, and I tried to listen to recordings at least a couple times through, and I take notes. And sometimes there were a lot of things that I would write down. Sometimes there were just a few things that I would write down. But as you two know, we all have our lists anyway. So what I would do, and I would take those comments, insert them into my list, and we would make that a priority, because we've been fortunate over the years to be adjudicated by some really fine judges, really fine people that have great backgrounds in pageantry arts. And we've learned a lot. As a matter of fact, I would say that the Carmel program was developed basically learning from the adjudicators that we had, because when we started, we had no idea what we were doing. And after listening to the great adjudicators, over the years, we learned a lot. And so we did incorporate a lot of their ideas, especially early on. But, you got to do it a little bit at a time. It's very easy, as you know, to overwhelm your students. And so I think regardless of, even if you get a long list of things, you have to prioritize what really matters at this point, or this point in the season is another thing that determines, if you're in the early part of the season, you may have some time to cover all those things. If you're later in the season, you may not be able to get to all of them. So you always have to think about the kids first and what they can handle.
Right. So piggybacking on that, what strategies do you use to communicate, the judges' feedback to the students in a way that's, constructive and motivating for them? Because it can be a lot coming at them.
Absolutely. And as I mentioned, we've had some really fine adjudicators over the years that make great recordings for us. And we play the recordings for the students, and that's one of the things that I talk to our judges about at Bands of America right now, is that the recordings have to be okay for the students to listen to. They're not just for the directors. And so our kids would love that. They would love listening to that feedback. And of course, the best part is when our staff is standing up there with the kids listening to the recordings, and the judge will say something that we've been harping on them about. And all the kids will be like, oh, okay, we get it. We get it. So those are some of the great moments, but we just let them listen to the recordings. And, most of the judges we've had have been really good about being educational with their comments, and not being condescending, but being helpful.
Right.
So we let them listen to the recordings.
Yep. Perfect.
I think it's so helpful too, and then also speaking of that, as a teacher and getting feedback from a judge's tape, I used to sometimes struggle with how to prioritize what to do first, even though I very clearly had a priority list of my own, trying to kind of balance that with the feedback that I was getting from these tapes. I struggled sometimes, and I think that it's natural to say that. So if our listeners are out there going, this is not easy. You're right, it isn't easy. It's a process which we all have to kind of learn and experience. So how do you decide what feedback to address immediately or later versus what needs to happen in the immediate future? How do you kind of make sense of all of that?
Yeah, I think based on the commentary that we get from the judges, there are things that stick out to me right away because they fit our concept of rehearsal. And so those are the things I'll gravitate to. But I also want to encourage, especially young directors. One of the things I didn't do very well when I was young with judges' recordings is I didn't think about the fact that maybe these folks know a lot of things that I don't, and maybe I need to think a slightly different way about things. And when I started to think about what these folks were hearing and seeing, I realized that I had a lot to learn. But the first thing I did was listen to comments and see which ones fit immediately into our philosophy. And then, for example, if someone just said, and I know you two will understand this, but if someone said on a recording, I need you guys to play louder, I would probably tend to not make that one of the priorities because it doesn't fit our concept. It doesn't fit our concept. And I know you two know what I'm talking about. Okay?
Very well.
But if someone suggests a way to better tune our clarinets or something, we're going to get right on that because we know that's something that fits right into our way of doing things, and we'll get right to work on those things. Someone talks about phrasing or musicianship. That's another thing that's very important to us. So anything that we hear about in terms of making music on the field, we're going to try to get right to, because we never want to be, or when I was there, we never wanted to be considered one of those groups that just plays everything at the same volume and isn't musical. So those would be other comments that I would get right to.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a question. In terms of, we have multiple tapes coming into directors and they're listening, and the amount of information can be overwhelming. So I have two parts here. If you're mid-season and you're getting all this information, what advice would you have for directors in balancing like the sheer volume of tapes every weekend? And the second one is, with that, have you been in a situation where it almost felt like the judges are telling you, like, look, you just need to start over. This is not a good concept. This isn't working. What do you do if you get to a point where the feedback feels like, look, this isn't going anywhere? What do we do now? Because I've seen that happen a couple of times where the feedback was really such that, like, how do you balance that? What do you do?
Well, I'll tell you a quick story that happened to us, and that happened to me. We were at a Bands of America regional in Cincinnati, and it was early on in my career and early on in my time at Carmel, and we didn't make finals, and I was devastated. And I was listening to the judges. I mean, I was in that mode where on the way back on the bus, I was like, don't talk to me. I didn't want anybody to talk to me. I just wanted to sit there and be mad. And then finally, I started listening to these tapes, and I got myself calmed down, and I was just like, let's listen to what these folks have to say. Well, it just happened to be, it was one of the best panels we could have possibly had at a contest. And in every area, whether it's music, whether it's marching, whether it's general effect, I listened and I started to take notes. And I went home, I got home, and I still remember this like it was yesterday. I went up to my bedroom and looked right in the mirror. And I said, you don't know what you're doing. And if you're going to continue teaching, you got to figure this out. So I started calling people, and I started with a couple of those judges. And I said, I really appreciate your thoughts. I need your help. And you know what's cool about our activity, and I know you guys know this, the best people in our activity are the first people that are willing to help and the first
Absolutely.
people that are willing to give advice. And so those folks were great. I started calling all over the country to these band directors that I knew were fantastic. And I said, what do I need to do? And they started talking to me. They said, what do you do in warm up? You know, how do you combine, how do you get your kids comfortable marching and playing? And I just started to learn all these things. And all of a sudden I was excited to get up in front of the band, you know, so it went from a negative to a real positive. But for young directors, sometimes they'll go the other way. And I'm going to encourage them to do what I did, because that took a lot of guts. And it took me
Right.
swallowing my ego. I had to realize that I didn't know what I was doing. But was I willing to learn? Yeah, because the kids were that important to me, and this activity was that important to me. So yeah, that's one of the things that I did, and people came and they helped.
Have you had experiences mid-season where it almost felt like it's overwhelming to you, like just the amount of sheer information
Oh
that
yeah.
you're getting? What do you do in those situations? Do you kind of table it and go, okay, look, that's for later, that's next year, or what do you suggest for us? I'm sure there's going to be a few directors, people listening in to this in the next couple of weeks, that they're going to be in that exact position mid-season.
Yeah. Again, when you get a lot of comments, and they may all be great things, you may be listening to all these comments and writing them down and saying, yep, agree, yeah, agree, yeah, agree. But you know, you can only do so much in a certain amount of time. And
Right.
one of the things I've learned, if I was younger and got that kind of feedback, David, I know I would have just tried to do it all. I would have gone out and we would have had these crazy rehearsals. And John, I know I know you both understand, but I would have had these crazy rehearsals, try to get all this stuff done. And I would have been like a madman out there. But of course, now, after being in this activity for a while, I realized you can only do one thing at a time. And that one thing has to be meaningful. It has to mean something. You have to really accomplish something. So now, if I was to do something like that, I'd make my list, but I'd say, okay, this is first, this is today. And if I get lucky, maybe I can get this one today too. If I get super lucky,
Right.
maybe I'll get to the third one.
Love it.
All
Love
right.
it. Yeah.
But you just got to pace it, because the one thing I learned is you can throw all kinds of stuff out at kids and they're just mediocre because you threw all kinds of stuff out at them. It's about anything that you work with on your kids. One thing has to be right. And then you can go from there. And that's something that I've learned over the years. So I would prioritize those comments.
Gotcha. Great.
I also think it's important to state that the feedback and the comments that go into the rehearsal structure, the ultimate goal is to give the students a good and positive experience.
Yeah.
If you take
Absolutely
a frustration out on them, that is something that we would like to strongly discourage, since that is not a healthy educational experience, right? Because at the end of the day, it's music. It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be enjoyable. Now, they've got to work hard. They also learn a lot, a litany of skill sets. But at the end of the day, it's band. It's supposed to be really great and fun, right? So I think it's important.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you have any other thoughts on that?
Well, you're right on, John. And one of the I do some clinics actually on this topic. And one of the things I talk about is you got to be careful as a director, because if you're getting upset with your kids about something that you don't think they're doing very well, maybe you need to look in the mirror like I did that night and say, did I actually teach these kids how to do what I'm talking about? Because I'll go into rehearsals, and you've both been there, where I'll hear a director start to get a little upset saying, clarinets, I can't believe you're still not playing that in tune. And then I talk to this director later. I say, well, what do you do to help your students with intonation? Well, we hold a tuner up in front of them, and make sure that one note is in tune. I'm like, well, okay, that's great. I'm not sure that's really going to help, and so we went through a process. But I really, and I learned that a long time ago. I was pretty negative when I started because some of the teachers I had were pretty negative. But as I went along, I started to realize it's about me knowing the information so I don't have to get upset. I can
That's
give
the
our
ticket.
kids the information and they can apply it. But I have to learn that information first. And if I don't know it, I got to find it somewhere. I call one of you two or I call somebody and I say, help, because there is help out there.
That's so true.
Well, and I
We've all been
remember
there.
when all of us were teaching the Cavaliers together, there were times where the three of us would look at each other like,
Exactly.
Or
Right.
I mean, I just had this experience with my own ensemble last week with the University of Michigan marching band. I found myself getting a little agitated, and all of a sudden I'm like, wait, it's not them. You're the problem. Because either I didn't explain it well, my expectations weren't correct, but it's taken years for me to be able to realize that oftentimes problems that the students are having aren't them.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Anyway, so it's a fascinating thing, right? Because you want to you have extraordinary expectations of them, and you care very much about how they experience this, and obviously the product and all this kind of stuff, which is all absolutely valid. But I keep going back to, and I've been thinking about this a lot lately. At the end of the day, their experience is the most important thing.
Absolutely. One of the things I talk to directors about is giving information without attitude. Just give the information.
That's a good way to say that.
Provide the information. Right.
So
it seems simple. We talked a little bit about just sort of the maturity that goes over time of being in this profession. And I remember my second year to teach, similar situation didn't go well for me. My first year was great. I made sweepstakes and got all the glory. Things went well. Some changes happened the next year. Ensemble's different. I got a 1, 2, 3 on stage, which was a 2 in Texas, and a 2. It's not bad, but it was for me. Like, expectation for myself was like, we're going to earn 1s, and I'm going to teach to that level. And I remember getting back on the bus, and I was speechless in front of the students. I was so upset for them, but it was kind of for me too, because I felt like I literally had failed. Like, well, clearly I don't know what I'm doing. And it was a reflection of me, like, having to turn and going to the director of bands at the time. I was associate director, and going like, what happened? And we talked about programming. We talked about a lot of things. They were like, I didn't ask enough questions. I should have asked more questions, and I would have been in a better place to set up my students for success. And because I didn't reach out and to look to people that just have had the experiences, I ultimately, I left with a bad taste in my mouth, and the students knew that they hadn't performed to the level that would have actually earned a 1, which is not what any of us were going for. Not that earning a 1 is the end all be all, but we know we had a standard set for ourselves that was sort of the, that's our quota. We want to do better than that.
Right.
But, at the end of the day, you hit the nail on the head. It's looking in the mirror and going, what did I not provide to make that a better, musical situation for my students? And that is the hardest thing to do, sometimes, to swallow your pride and be like, yep, that was me. That was me. And let's go back to the drawing board and fix that. And now I will tell you, the next year, it was a different situation. Like, that one experience is like, okay, I need to now adjust how I think and and I will tell you, like, I think that's an every year kind of thing. But like, looking back on, okay, what?
Right.
Well, and how do I keep learning from the people that are, obviously have that information for myself? So thank you.
And then also too, since we're talking about this, and before Richard, I ask this upcoming question, I do think it's important for directors to think about the feedback that they get. Their first reaction should not be a negative reaction towards the judge. Oh, well, they just don't know what they're doing. They're just not very good at this. It's easy to kind of deflect the blame, right? But I think we fall into that trap of going, this person, what do they know? I mean, there's truth in everything. Now, there are obviously fantastic judges, and it's a spectrum just like anything else, right? But I would urge everybody out there to start from a place that there's truth in everything, and perception is reality.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. That is so right on. Because I remember, and Richard, we've been in many critiques together, in the decade we taught together, and I remember going to some of those critiques as a young teacher thinking I knew more than the person that was talking to me. And that's unfortunate. That was a stupid thing on my part. And at the time, someone should have slapped me down. But I was confident, and it is what it is. I look back and I could have learned something. Even if I had more information to offer, I could have learned. That person obviously had an opinion about something we were doing. I dropped the ball in not allowing that information in. Like, I put a wall up. Like, well, I don't need information from them. I can do this better than they can. And man, I was wrong. Just say it right now. That was wrong. And looking back as the younger teachers, and I'm sure we're going to have younger listeners. That's a situation that every time you're going into it, I feel like go into it with an open mind. Even if the information you get doesn't necessarily resonate immediately, let it bounce around in there, because oftentimes it will lead you to another destination that is important in the long run. So that's great information.
Yep,
all right.
absolutely.
So then just to kind of circle back to our conversation about judges and tapes. So let's say hypothetically you get either differing or conflicting opinions or advice from the various panel of judges. How do you navigate that?
Yeah, well, that's happened 1 or 1,000 times, I think, as I've been a director. And again, it doesn't mean there's only one way to approach things. If you think about the two approaches from those judges, you might, again, like we've been talking, you may learn something from the back. Okay, this person thinks we should do it this way. This person thinks this way. All right, well, maybe if you're a young director, maybe you try both if you're not sure and see what really works. But, that's going to happen. People can only judge based on their experience. So
Right.
If you haven't had what I call, I guess, world-class experience, and you don't have this huge spectrum to draw from, sometimes you may not have the same information as other people based on their experience. So when I get that conflicting information, it kind of comes back to what I talked about earlier. What's the best solution for our students? And if I think one of them really works for our situation and one of them doesn't, then that's an easy decision. If I'm not sure, I may bring my staff in and say, what do you folks think? And sometimes I'll ask some of my colleagues that are in the same county or same city, around Indianapolis when I was at Carmel, and just say, what do you guys think? Do you hear stuff like this? And what do you do? So it's just constantly a learning process. But yeah, that's happened a lot where we get conflicting information. And I really think the answer is to decide what you're going to use based on what fits your philosophy and your system.
Yeah. No, I love that. And you mentioned earlier, what's meaningful in that moment with your students. Like that's an important distinction. And, that person that's on the other side of that tape, in their experience, that might be what they would feel would be best, but they don't know your students as well as you do. They don't know their prior experiences and what they're going through for the next 4 weeks, 6 weeks, however long, for the season. So I appreciate that advice. It resonates with me. Kind of wrapping up here. This last question is not the last, next to last question is about you. So we asked just about everybody, have they read a book or, come across something that they've read that has been particularly inspiring for their teaching journey, whether it's just as a teacher or a musician or really anything, but something you could share that we can share with our listeners and say, hey, go pick that up.
One of the things that I've kind of turned to as I've gotten older is the whole tuning thing, and trying to, for bands, trying to use the just tuning process and seeing how close we can get to getting chords to resonate, getting unisons to resonate, getting the winds to resonate every time we play. And I know you guys are way into that as well. But one of the books that I really learned a lot from is Shelley Jago's book, Tuning for Wind Instruments. She's at Wright State University, I believe. I think that's right. And it's just really, really great. Now, I will warn directors that are getting this book, and Shelley knows I say this because we're great friends, but you can only read a couple pages at a time of that book because she gets really detailed. But boy, there is so much information in there that you can use. And there's some of it that, she's so smart, it just goes way over my head. But then there's the stuff that I can understand and use. And it's been a great book. Actually, she has 2 books. She has one on just instrumental music, teaching instrumental music. I've read stuff that you two have put together too over the years that was just, I thought was great. You guys always take such a realistic and practical approach. So I've read some of your stuff. I guess I would probably leave it at that because I could name a million books that might work for some and may not work for others. But Shelley's books, I think, work for almost anybody.
Absolutely. It's an excellent book.
Yep.
Yeah, it really is a spectacular book. Everybody listening should absolutely check that out. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, Richard, we ask this a final question of all of our guests. What is your favorite time signature?
My favorite time signature. Okay, man, you guys ask the tough questions. I'm telling you, because that's... I think I'm going to say 7/8 because it includes 2/8 and 3/8, or can include 4/8 and 3/8, or 5/8 and 2/8.
Right.
And all those meters I love dealing with, and I love trying to set up the rhythms and the patterns and the accents, the feels of those. So yeah, I'm a little out there when it comes to that. I still like those kind of meters.
Your answer was the same as Jerry Junkins, so you're in good company.
You are in good company.
That's a win.
That's a win.
That's a major win for me.
Absolutely. So, hey, Richard, it was so wonderful having you on. We'll go ahead and wrap up. We've taken a lot of your time today, but we really do appreciate the insight for our listeners, and actually for us. It's always good to hear, from professionals like you that are, leading the charge. So, thanks so much for your time today.
It's been a pleasure, and you two know how much I respect you both and what you do for our activity, and I wish you the very best, and it just means the world that you had me on. So thanks so much.
Awesome.
Thanks, Richard.
Thanks so much. Okay, everyone, that's a wrap for this episode of Common Time Podcast. We hope you gained some valuable insights and inspiration to take back to your ensemble. New episodes of Common Time Podcast drop every Monday. We hope you enjoy the show. Please take a moment to leave us a rating or a review on your favorite podcast platform. It really helps us reach more music educators just like you. And a special thanks to our wives, Jessica and Teresa, for keeping us organized enough to make this happen. Also, don't forget to follow us on your favorite social media platforms at Common Time Podcast for updates, behind-the-scenes content, and more. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode. Keep making music and keep making a difference.